Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to cover what's new with KNIME Analytics Platform 4.3 and KNIME Server 4.12. My name is Cynthia Padilla. I'm in the customer care team here at KNIME. My role is to help customers learn more about KNIME and also, ask us to join us and be users of KNIME's Analytics Platform and KNIME Server. And with me today, I have Scott Fincher. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Scott. I'm a data scientist on the education evangelism team. My job at KNIME is to spread the word about our software and help people use the software better.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Scott and I are in Texas. Actually, our office is in Austin, Texas, and we always like to see where people are joining from. So if you don't mind, there is, I think the chat should be enabled. And if you can tell us where you're joining from and just type the country or the state where joining us from, that makes it really interesting for us to see where people are joining, if it's Europe or Latin America, US, Canada, that would be great. And thank you. If you're staying late to watch today's webinar, we appreciate it. Or you woke up early, that's great. It'll be posted later on YouTube, not today, but later once we do some editing, but it'll be available for you to watch. Okay, and before we get started, you're all going to be muted, so they won't be able to ask questions, but you can always ask your question on the Q&A. So if you go to the bottom of the Zoom meeting, if you drag your mouse, you'll be able to see the chat, the Q&A, where you mute your button. Right there is a Q&A section, and you can type your questions. We'll have time to go over those after the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. The agenda for today, like always, we'll start with the KNIME Analytics Platform improvements, the new features. Then we'll go into the KNIME Hub, KNIME Server, and some community contributions. And I'll go ahead and start with some of the KNIME features. And the one that I like to start is the file handling network. Just to point this out, this is out of a lab section. So as you know, we have a lab section on the KNIME Analytics Platform. You won't find them there anymore. You can search and type for and search for them, or you can find them maybe in the input-output section of the KNIME Analytics Platform. But we've been working. Our engineering team has been working the file handling framework for a while. We released some of the nodes back in the summer release, and the goal or the benefit of the file handling framework is a consistent user experience. So you have the same look and feel, whether you're using the Excel node or the CSV node, they behave the same. It makes it easier for you to connect to different file systems, easy to migrate from one file system to another one, share or collaborate with other users, maybe manage different systems in the same workflow. And as you can see here on the slides, also less nodes. So your development time may go, reduce the time, because now you can, instead of having maybe 6 or 8 nodes, you can do the same with 3 nodes. So before you had to connect to the Amazon S3, maybe connect to remote files, loop through get the files. Now with this new file framework, you can connect to Amazon to authenticate, then to the S3 connector, and then get your file. And we also have a lot of performance improvements, so you will see these nodes running faster. Additional things, well, you have a lot of flexibility with the new file system, file handling. You can connect to a local file system, to a relative path or relative workflow, browse to the file, mix and match. This was already on the nodes that you could point to the mount point or relative path. You don't have to remember and type the path anymore. will set that for you. You can connect to different file systems, whether they're in the cloud or on premise, whether SSH or FTP. And then you also have the dynamic input ports. So if you drag and drop, for example, the Excel reader on your editor, you won't see the input port. And that maybe you're just pointing to a local file, you can just browse to that file and connect. But if you're connecting to other file system like S3 or Azure or Google, then you can click on the ellipses that you see on the node and then add the port. And then you'll be really easy to connect to any of these systems. The file system is agnostic. You can replace one connector to the CSV reader and it'll recognize that input location. And then you can quickly update the path and then see that file. So you can go from Microsoft to Amazon, switch things as you are building and developing testing items on your workflow. Additional flexibility you have because you can mix and match support for on-premise files or on the cloud. As you can see, you have here the transfer file node. This is really neat because it allows you to transfer files, whether it's from different clouds or the same cloud or on-premise environment. So in here, I have the transfer file, and you can go from, let me minimize this, from Google, I can transfer a file to S3 really quickly. Again, it supports multiple inputs, so you can add an input port for the transfer file, and then the one on top will be the input, and then it'll add it to the S3 file system. So really easy to move from one cloud to another one, or from the same cloud. You may be using Microsoft Azure, you want to move a file from blob storage to SharePoint, and you can use the transfer files for that. Or if it's on-premise, you can do the same. So again, very flexible and the ability to work with different file systems. So in addition to these features that we have, the flexibility, you also have added a table or data transformation within these nodes. So we have a more consistent UI. So as you open these nodes, the CSV or Excel reader, for example, you have a consistent UI. They all look and feel the same. And you now can also transform some of the table information and the nodes. So if you see right here, you have the transformation tab, the second tab on the reader node. In this case, it's a CSV reader. You have access, again, to the file. But in here, you can also modify the data types, for example, or you can rename a column. You can also change the order of the columns. You can sort, you can change a data type, and you can, as you apply the changes, you can see those changes. You can remove one of the columns and apply those changes. So it is available in every table reader node, and this is via the what we call table manipulator. So as you open your, once you connect to that file, you can go to the transformation tab and make the changes. So the same manipulation that you see on the CSV reader node and other nodes is also a new node called table manipulator. What is this important to you? Well, you can easily make transformations in one single node. Again, before you may have to do, you use 6 nodes to do filtering, to change data types, to or change the order of your columns. Now with the table manipulator, you can do the same in one node. It also supports multiple inputs, so you can add inputs and do unions or intersections. So you can have, for example, right here, it's disabled, but you could do a union, intersection if you have multiple files, and change the order of the columns, move it up or down, disable a column, rename it, and all these 6 steps that you had before, now you had in one single node. So again, less development time, and this is a lot of our users had these requests where, hey, how can we do this faster? And now we have a solution. One of the highlights for the KNIME Analytics Platform 4.3 is the KNIME Columnar table backend. So what does that mean? It means better performance for you. So your workflows should run faster, but this is something you have to enable. This is a new feature, is now as part of the labs. So you have to download the extension and apply it. You can try it out, give us feedback. You can go install it and look under the lab section, extensions, Columnar table backend. And, as you know, KNIME uses different data types. We use strings. Sometimes our users use complex text documents or molecules or images. So, performance sometimes is different. But, what our engineering team has done, they've reviewed the underlying data representation and made changes to improve performance. Now, I'm not going to go over the details, but you're welcome to read these blog posts that our engineering team, where they went over all the technical changes and what the new representation is, so you can take a look at what we've done there. And again, the main goal is for increased performance. So to apply it, once you have installed the extension, you right-click on the workflow and select Configure. And on the Table Backend tab, you select Columnar Storage. Give it a try, and welcome to feedback and see how fast or faster are your workflows running with that. Moving on to more extensions and integrations, I'm going to start with Salesforce. So we added the Salesforce connectivity on the last release. It's been great. Our customers like it. They can now use a node to connect to Salesforce, and we continue to add features to this integration, and we thank you for your feedback. In this release, we added a new node called Salesforce Simple Query, which it really simplifies the way that you can get or read data from Salesforce. Before, we had a node where you had to enter the SQL language that Salesforce support, the SOQL, and it was a little bit complex, but now you can just select the object or the table and then drag and drop the fields that you want to read. So very similar to other nodes that we have, where you just select the field, the table, and then the fields you want to read. Now, the Salesforce extensions, as well as many other ones, are coming out of labs. So you won't find the Salesforce extension labs. They are going to be under tools and services. And other extensions that are also coming out of a lab section are from the deep learning extensions based on Keras, TensorFlow, also our integrations with H2O and Tableau. So you can always search to find them and then see in which section they are. Moving on, let's go to components. So components been around for a while. You've been able to use components or create components. As you know, they're components bundle functionality for sharing and reusing. You can use the components that we have on the KNIME Hub. You can drag and drop and use them on your workflows, but you can also create your own components and share them with your team. Well, it was, you can create a layout, design the layout so users can enter information. But before, it was a little bit challenging to reorder the layout. So if you wanted to have, the target column on the top and then move things around, you had to delete the nodes and then add them to have the right order. Well, we have changed that and make it a lot easier. So in this release, the author of the component can use the configuration dialog layout to easily move things up or down in the dialog. So again, making improvements so you don't have to change your workflow, just go and move things around as you would do, with other components. So great feature that, again, will save you time and give you more options for creating your components. Great. Well, now Scott will help me continue with the Python changes and improvements in this release, and then he'll move on into the KNIME Hub and the server features.
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So last thing we want to talk about with the new KNIME Analytics Platform features surrounds the Python stuff. So for those of you who've been using Python within KNIME for a while, you'll already know some of this, but we have several of these different nodes that allow you to include Python scripts into your workflow. You see several of them on the right there. They're going to allow you to just execute arbitrary Python code. Maybe it's to train a model, maybe it's to actually apply that model, or to generate some visualizations, or even the deep learning Keras TensorFlow integration that we have that's reliant on Python as well. So when we're exchanging data between KNIME and Python, it's bidirectional. depending on which way you go, well, it doesn't depend on the which way you go. It's going to be using pandas data frames underneath the hood. And so to actually use this, you have to go and set up a Python executable. You set that in your KNIME preferences. We recommend using a Conda environment to do it. It's kind of a one-time setup, but then, anytime that you use a Python node within KNIME, you're going to be pointing to that environment. So it works well as far as it goes. We have, users who've been using it for a long time, but there was a little bit of a challenge using it. That was when you want to take something you've built locally that has your own Conda environment on your laptop or your desktop or whatever, that's going to run fine. But when you need to put it onto the server, sometimes you could run into issues where the dependencies that you need to be present in your Python environment weren't there on the server. And so we thought, well, what is it maybe that we could do about that would help resolve that problem, make things a little easier? One of the things we came up with is this Conda environment propagation node. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the list of packages in your Conda environment and just kind of lay them out for you, as a series of all the different packages with associated checkboxes. And you can go in and check and say, okay, for this particular workflow and these nodes, in fact, in my workflow, I want to make sure that I have, MKL available on the server. I want to make sure that, whatever package is going to be up there. So there's a consistency between what you're doing locally when you set up your environment and what's happening on the server. That environment, that Conda environment, is going to be replicated according to what you set here. So it just makes it easy to go through the dialog and check and uncheck whatever it is that you need to make sure that that environment is provisioned appropriately. And that definition is going to be saved in the workflow. So hopefully this is a good quality of life improvement for those of you who are using Python within KNIME and deploying things to KNIME Server a lot. Okay. Some other changes that are worth talking about related to Python and KNIME. We have this package knimepy, which will allow you to do some things with KNIME Server. So you've already been able to execute from Jupyter Notebooks locally on your machine. You could execute a KNIME workflow, or from within KNIME, you could already call a Jupyter Notebook and execute that. So the Nimepy package now has the added capability to execute these remote workflows now that are on a server. You can use some local data that you have as input and pass that along when you call the workflow. And when the workflow runs, you're going to get output back as a pandas data frame, as you're probably used to already. To use this, all you need to do is just provide a URL to the workflow on the server. And you see that down here in this little example Jupyter Notebook screenshot we have. There's the URL of the KNIME server along with the login credentials, and then passing in some data to that workflow. It's going to be executed, come back and give me that output as a pandas data frame. So again, this is about making sure that you can run your workflows. You can call them now with Jupyter Notebooks, but on the KNIME server. So some additional capability there. One of the things that I really like in the new release is the addition of dynamic ports to the Python nodes. So we've already had dynamic ports in some past releases where we added the ability, you basically, on nodes where it's supported, you check the three little boxes or the three little dots here on the node, and then you can add some arbitrary number of input ports. You may have seen that on the concatenate node or the merge variables node, for example. Well, we've brought that to bear now on the Python nodes as well. And what this is going to do, this new Python script node, which is in the labs extension, is going to replace a bunch of the existing nodes in terms of functionality. So where before we had Python scripting, 1-to-1 for one input to one output, 1-to-2, 2-to-1, and so on. This node is going to be able to replace all of those. You can add as many input or output ports as you need for this single Python scripting node to be able to blend data together in a more efficient way. Each input port that you provide is going to have its own distinct pandas data frame that's coming into the node. And then when we're looking at this, you can, when you're adding the ports, this is what happens when you click on the three little dots here. You also have the ability to specify not just input and output data tables, but also input and output objects. So in case you're, building pickles, or you're taking models and you're pickling them, you can have those flow into and out of the node as well. So this is a nice way to, kind of clean up maybe some of your existing workflows, make things a little bit neater and tidier and more well organized. Okay, so stepping away from the KNIME Analytics platform for a moment, I want to talk about some of the new features that are available on the KNIME Hub. So hopefully you've been using the Hub. We're really excited about it just as a way to be able to share workflows, components, nodes. You can go out and grab extensions really easily just by searching for what you need and dragging and dropping it into your workspace. So if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to right now at hub.knime.com. There's a lot of cool stuff available there. But because we're really interested in making it a more key part of what we offer, we've gone in and added some interface updates. In particular, some of those are around user profiles. So the users are really the key aspect of what makes the Hub work, right? Individual users who are submitting their workflows and building components and making them available to the broader community. So you can look at your own profile now and see things like the workflows that you've published, how many of them there are, as well for components and extensions, if that applies. Any kudos that you received for your work, you can keep track of that. And then as well, other items from other folks that you may have, liked. You want to favorite them and highlight them for later. Those will show up down there in your profile, so you can more easily find those if you need them later on. And then, of course, we have some, nice badges and other things listed up here at the top. Something else that we've been adding, apart from just the profile stuff, is the idea of spaces. So we've already had spaces on the Hub, and you may have used them by enabling them in your KNIME Analytics platform directly. We have had already a public space and a private space. So the public space, obviously, when you want to publish something from knimepy, you just drag your component or workflow there, it gets published and everyone can see it. And the private space was just kind of there as a way to maybe store some small workflows on the cloud for yourself or something. But now we've added some additional functionality to that so that you can have additional private and public spaces, and you can name them, you can add descriptions, and you can also add individuals, other users on the Hub to a private space. So now where we're heading toward is really more of a collaborative environment, where if I create a new space that's dedicated to a particular data science project that I'm working on, for example, I can add Cynthia, I can add Tobias, as is shown here on the screen, to my private space, and we all are going to have access to what's in that space together to be able to work on stuff in a more seamless way. So try out the new functionality for spaces. Again, you can make changes to those through the KNIME Analytics platform, but you can now also make changes directly to them on the Hub itself. So, I can see here where I've got a space, I can rename it on the fly, I can add some additional description on the fly just to make it easier for people to understand what I'm working on. And then obviously the collection of workflows and components I have that are part of that space. Probably the most interesting new feature for the Hub for most of you is going to be its integration into KNIME Analytics platform directly. So within AP 4.3, you can now see over here next to the description pane, there's now a KNIME Hub tab that you can invoke that's going to allow you to search from directly within KNIME Analytics platform, find those components that you're looking for, find those example workflows, and then open them up directly within KNIME without having to go back and forth between your web browser. So this is another quality of life improvement. Everything that you need from the Hub is going to be available right there. So if I find, this customer count and churn rate by time raised cohort component, go search for it in the Hub, click it, drag it in my workspace, it's going to download it, there it is. Same thing for installing extensions or anything else that you might have been doing already using the KNIME Hub. So this is going to be really helpful, I think, for everybody. I certainly have been using it already myself, and it's really great to have there at your fingertips.